Hello, Council. Good evening, and thank you so much for being so accommodating for this special Council meeting this evening. We very much appreciate all of you fitting this in because I think it's very important for our community to get this done quickly. So I will declare this special meeting on a Thursday, which is very odd, now open, and ask that you turn off your cell phone or other electronic device, and that we are recording this meeting. And for more information about the bylaw, the retention bylaw, you can get that information from the clerk's office. I did have regrets from both Deputy Mayor Davidson and from Councillor Nicol, who were unable to attend this evening. So we'll start with the agenda. It's very short and sweet, and we need a mover and a seconder for the special agenda meeting. That would be Councillor Waters and Councillor Orsatti. All those in favor? That is carried. And Councillor Payne's joining us now. Welcome, Councillor. Thank you so much for being, fitting this in tonight. I know it was difficult for everyone to do that. I would ask at this time if anybody wishes to disclose any conflict of interest. Seeing none, then we'll go forward to our one and only business item that is on the agenda tonight. And I will get first a mover and a seconder, and then ask if staff might just walk us quickly through in case there's people who are interested in how they can move forward with this stage 2 readiness. So I have a mover, which is Councillor Van Berkel, and a seconder, which is Councillor Fowler. And Mr. Rayner, do we know if who's going to be walking us through?
We're all in favor.
Oh, before we vote in favor, though, we're just going to get a little walk through. Mr. Kane, were you going to do that for us?
Yes, your worship, I was, if that's okay. So good evening, council, your worship, and members of the public that are watching, and business owners, I'm assuming, as well. Thank you for meeting on a Thursday night. Although we have been waiting and watching for reopenings, the Monday announcement came fast and furious for us, and staff has certainly done everything we can to get our businesses open, and that has been top of mind throughout this pandemic, has been supporting our local businesses, both chains and our local players as well, and focusing on something that you've heard me say, lighter, quicker, cheaper, many times, something in this case that translates to what we think is an uncomplicated process to get our businesses open starting tomorrow morning, all going well. We've been watching and waiting, and despite this being the night before the new regulation coming in, or the new opening coming in, we've been looking to learn from others, and at the same time trying to wait for the regulations to come out to give us guidance as well, so we're not conflicting with the province. So here we are, and we'll walk you through it now. So, if we're all thinking collectively, there's probably about 95% of our businesses, or restaurants in particular, have the ability to expand out onto private property. So that has been the focus of this particular bylaw. Thank you to the foresight of the CAO's office. We've also expanded to include being able to go out in the public space and using our right-of-way permissions, use of right-of-way permissions that we already have, and a variation thereof. But the focus has been on that 95% of private properties, and that's what we're looking for, and that's what we're looking at to focus on tonight. So essentially, it's a three-part bylaw, or a three-part report. First is the first part that we're focusing on is the acknowledgement form. So it's essentially an honor system, and basically what it's based on is that through an online system, thanks to the IT department, there is an online system where there will be a checklist that people can just go through and acknowledge that they will continue to follow the rules that they're already required to follow. So not asking them to do anything that they don't already have to do, but certainly just reminding them of what their obligations already are, to allow them to have patio options for their business. And at the same time, by signing that acknowledgement online, making it very easy, it also gives us a record of what businesses are out there, so that we can have the ability to follow up if need be. And I'll talk about that and a little bit about the third part. The second part is the guidelines, and I've had discussions with a couple of we've had discussions with a couple of restaurant owners already. You know, it's very easy to get into a prescription process, but given that, you know, restaurant owners literally have hours to potentially get ready, we want to leave as much flexibility as we can. So focusing on the outcome and not actually how the restaurants or patios get there was a key part of those guidelines. So, you know, things like, you know, preventing, providing some sort of protection for the users of those patios, like, you know, flagging or curb stops or those sorts of things, but not necessarily prescribing what those are, allowing the flexibility for those restaurants to do what they need to do to get open. And then if there's follow-up that needs to occur, certainly we have allocated staff to do that, to keep the ball rolling, so to speak. So that was the guideline process and the second process. Then the third part of it was the implementation side. So, the follow-up piece that I mentioned, with respect to, you know, having a record at least of what businesses are out there operating and those that have acknowledged the rules that are already in play and that they'll continue to play by, which is helpful. And then the second part is the enforcement side, which you'll see part of the bylaw tonight is to update that enforcement section of the bylaw, just to allow us, you know, it's always going to be educational first and supporting our businesses first. But we do want some ability for disincentives for, if there is something that's affecting public health and safety, we want some ability there to backstop those discussions if we need to. So I don't know if you want to get into, I'll leave the summary at that point. If you want to get into the guidelines or in more detail, I'm certainly here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kane. That was very helpful. Questions or comments from members of council? Councillor Arsati.
Thank you, Your Worship. And first, I want to say thank you for staff for working quickly to put this together, in the best interests of our restaurants and businesses. As you mentioned, it's been a very difficult time for them. Just clarification, Mr. Kane, you said that it's an honor system online, so they have to first submit the form, which is, and then it states in this report that operations will be doing a staff review. Is that on site and when they complete this and send this completed form online, this comes in place as of, if it's voted on tonight, as of 12:01 a.m., so midnight tonight. Are they able to start setting up right away tomorrow, or do they have to wait for acknowledgement of this? I'm just wondering how that's going to work for the weekend.
Thank you.
Yes, through your worship. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Get a leg there. Through your worship to Councillor Arsati. Yeah, the idea is to not require any not feedback, but any acknowledgement from the town. The idea is that, yeah, as of 12:01, they can theoretically open. I'm trying not to look at Dave Ross on here, but I think IT is set up to either set that system up after, make that go live as of after this council meeting, or certainly by tomorrow morning. The idea is that as soon as they tick that acknowledgement, then as far as the town's concerned, they're open for business. And what happens there is, we'll do follow up from that point on, just to make sure everything's working out okay. But the idea is not to make them wait. They can start operating, and we'll catch up with them to see how things are going.
Thank you. Councillor Arsati, follow up.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. On this item again, then just how is this being communicated to businesses, to the restaurants that are registered with the town right now?
Mr. Kane?
I'll just repeat the question. I was just asking, how is this this opportunity being communicated to our restaurant businesses in town?
Through your worship, yes. Sorry, I was. Thank you for buying me some time, Councillor Arsati. I was trying to find my unmute button that somehow disappeared on me when I didn't want it to. So, yes, the communication piece. has been a key part of the process and the team that's been working on this this week. So economic development has a list of those businesses that were part of what's for dinner tonight. So, was direct communication with those. And then also, certainly getting the word out on all of our social media channels and through our press releases. And I think, so far from what we can tell, word is getting around regardless. We are already hearing from restaurants, especially our local ones. But the communications plan was a key part of the report tonight. And there is a section in there that provides some more detail. Sorry, I just want to go back to, if I can, through your worship, to Councillor Asadi, just a correction. When I was talking about opening tomorrow, that is, that will be the case for the 95+%, I think, of restaurants that are able to expand onto private property. There is potentially a handful of restaurants, and I think I literally mean handful, unless someone can correct me, that have a front door that opens up onto a public right of way. So where a restaurant doesn't have an option of using their own land, if there is a need to use the public right of way, by all means, they're able to do that. There is an extra step involved in terms of getting that occupancy permit. But as I said, with 95% of the private side out of the way and able to do that autonomously, essentially, it allows that implementation team that's been put together for this project to, to throw the full brunt of our resources at that handful of people that might need that extra step. So there may be a slight delay for those restaurants.
Thank you. And on the communications piece, I can also say I've already approved a quote, so I know the communications team is ready to go as soon as we vote, assuming it's in favor. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question around the numbers that restaurants are allowed to have. Not all restaurants are created equal in terms of the amount of patio space that they can have or expand into. I did notice that on one paragraph talked about allowing 50% of their indoor capacity to be outdoors. A lot of restaurants have been hurting, and the only way they're going to make money is if they're at full capacity, which they can do at at dinner time and lunches and that kind of stuff. So, is there any way for restaurants to have the same capacity they would normally have with indoor and outdoor? Like some restaurants have indoor and outdoor patio space, or indoor space and patio space. So I'm just wondering why we limited to 50% of the indoor space to be used for patios. Thank you.
Mr. Kane?
Yes, Your Worship. It is tied. There's a couple of reasons for it. One is just to, where there's multi-tenant facilities, the idea was not to have all of a sudden, a larger restaurant that's occupying across multiple frontages. So being cognizant of the neighbors. At the same time, though, hearing Councillor Water loud and clearly the need to, make those businesses as viable as possible. So, there's a social distancing piece that automatically starts to spread things out across those footprints that we want to be very cognizant of and respective of and keep promoting as we see our way through this. And then at the same time, and probably most appropriately, is the AGCO, the Alcohol and Gaming Commission guidelines, which speak to that 50% capacity piece as well. So these guidelines are to reflect those AGCO provisions and make the interpretation and applicability more consistent across the board.
Thank you.
So I'm going to follow up on that, and then I'll get to you, Councillor Van Berkel and Councillor Icy. So I thought that was also in the Premier's announcement, that number, but I could be wrong. I was quickly trying to jot down notes, and we haven't got the regs yet, so we don't know. But assuming it isn't tied to the province, and assuming there was a restaurant that was able to, would we, through economic development, work with them to make those whatever is appropriate? Mr. King?
Yes, Your Worship. I believe the 50% was also included in the, I think you may have heard it through the actual press release at the province. That was where the 50% was. It's difficult to confirm that in the absence of the regs, but that was part of it. And yes, there are, the idea, particularly during these times and, during normal times, whatever they were, we're always there for flexibility, right? Particularly if there's a business that needs that injection of additional revenue by being able to expand larger. So if that opportunity is there, then by all means, the the patio team, don't take the negative connotation of that. The patio team would be able to, to focus and help business on an individual basis given their particular circumstances.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I want to thank staff to be on top of this, because great to see whenever this comes out and they're right there and they called a special council meeting to cover this. I think it's very important. I don't have a whole lot of trouble with what's written in, in your reports. The only things that I would say that I have a problem with is where it says the fencing off with planters and whatever. That's one thing that I guess it's not a big problem for the change, but for the individuals that own their restaurants, it's a problem. It's extra cost. The other thing is the advantage that people that own the land where they can put their patio, they can do that tomorrow. The people that have to go on to put their patios out on town property, they have to get a permit and whatever else, which costs money, and it may take some time. So there's a disadvantage there for them. And I would like to, kind of see the permit price, why should they be paying a permit when the rest doesn't? Let them set it up, let them start and come in and have a look at it after it's done. If there's some violation of, what we're asking for, tell them to correct it rather than have them wait for this. Those are my comments. And I'm like, those are the only, my concerns, because it's the little guys that are going to get hurt again, not the change and people that own the properties.
Mr. Inwood or Mr. Kane?
Thank you, Your Worship. Perhaps I'll start and Mr. Kane can jump in if I miss anything. But with respect to the right-of-way permit fees, the recommendation before you this evening recommends that those fees are waived. So there would be no fee for the small business owner or any business owner in this particular circumstance. And additionally, as Mr. Kane alluded to earlier, we are talking about just literally a handful of businesses that may look to expand their patios out onto the right-of-way. We are certainly dialed in and ready to deploy the resources accordingly upon those requests to make this a priority for them. And we anticipate very little of a delay at all, if any, in getting to them getting them their ability to advance the program for their small business.
Thank you, Mr. Inwood. Mr. Kane, did you want to add to that, or?
Not to that particular comment. I will, through you to Councillor Rickle, just comment on the barrier piece. So the AGCO does have requirements for barriers, and we want to be consistent with those provincial requirements. At the same time, too, like the guidelines are indeed guidelines, right? So we were very careful not to get too prescriptive in that checklist for businesses, and not to prescribe, what we think might be best and which, they may not think is best, or what they're not able to do in a short period of time. So the idea is to have some sort of demarcation there, as I mentioned before, not to dwell on it, lighter, quicker, cheaper, but, certainly there are options there that, don't involve fancy planters, in the short term. It could be just a matter of flagging tape and some basic curb stops, but there is an element of basic public safety there that we want to maintain, without getting in the way of those restaurants being able to feel or do what is best for them.
Thank you. A follow-up, Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. I kind of knew that, but I just wanted everybody to know, the restaurant owners, that, that's our line of thinking. I'm sure it's every councillor's thinking and our staff's thinking, that we're not out there to gouge anybody or stop anybody from, going back into business. Thank you for the explanation.
Thank you. Councillor Ices.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just in reading the report, I noticed the penalties for corporations set at $5,000. I'm just wondering how that number was arrived at. To me, it seems a little bit heavy, as Councillor Van Berkel said. Not all businesses, not all restaurants are created equal, and a $5,000 hit to a chain and a $5,000 hit to an individual smaller company is totally different. We also we see different things in society now where, you know, it's okay to have a whole bunch of people when we're protesting peacefully, and the social distancing goes away, and so now it seems like a heavy penalty to me, but I would just like to hear your comments on that.
Mr. King?
Yes, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Ices, yes, you know, there is certainly mixed messaging out there, and it's very difficult giving all the nuances and particular circumstances when you're trying to balance social distancing and, you know, bring back, you know, some sort of socializing amongst yourselves. So the 5,000K did go through, you know, quite a bit of discussion. Sorry, the $5,000 fine did go through a lot of discussion. As I mentioned in the overview, you know, the default is and will continue to be, you know, through all things related to COVID, to be educational first, and unfortunately, you know, teeth second. But, you know, the $5,000, because we're in an honor system or an acknowledgement system, you know, we needed sufficient disincentive just to nudge people in the right direction. You know, I'm not going to say that we never intend, you know, to apply that fee in a public forum such as this, but, you know, certainly our team, as you've heard tonight through Mr. Inwood and others, you'll probably hear later tonight, is that the whole idea is to cooperate and to get these businesses moving. So the $5,000 was, you know, it had to be enough of a disincentive. So if we did have someone that was uncooperative and creating a public safety issue, and, you know, and basically thinking a fine as a price for doing business and making a lot of money, you know, on a particular evening, and flouting rules that benefit all of us, you know, we had to bake that disincentive in. But by all means, you know, it's not there to be used as a club against our local businesses.
Thank you. Do you have follow-up, Councillor Ices?
Yeah, through your worship, I just wanted to hear that, you know, that wasn't the first resort when we find violations, you know, that there is an educational part of it. And I do believe that a lot of businesses are going to be judged by society anyway on how they deal with this. So there is a fairly high incentive to be safe about it. So I think a lot of this will be self-enforcement, but thank you for that.
Thank you. I had a similar concern when I saw that, but because I know, because it's was announced by the Premier, people will just think it's okay to do it. They won't think that they have to call the town, or, you know, I'm on my own property, I'm making my patio bigger, what's the big deal? So the fact that we would go to that person and say, you know, you have to sign that acknowledgement and you know, follow the rules of the AGCO, which they should know about if they're licensed, but you're going to get the odd one who's going to go, you can't make me, right? And that's, you know, that's when you might need the incentive to have somebody play by the rules. Mr. Keane, did you have something to add? Or
just very briefly, you know, to adopt Councillor Isley's language, you know, if anything, you use the words first resort is the educational piece. The 5,000 is last resort as far as the town staff are concerned.
Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did remiss to thank the staff for putting this report together as quickly as they did, so I do appreciate that. My question has to do with temporary structures. It does mention in the report temporary structures. Could they give us a list of temporary structures I was thinking of? I'm thinking of like an open walled tent, those types of things. Is that considered a temporary structure for the patio? So could we just get a rough idea of what you're talking about when you're using that terminology? Thank you.
Mr. Kane.
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Waters, and Mr. Vickers might jump in here, but any sort of structure would require a permit. The idea is just to get people open. So, you know, certainly umbrellas and shade, you know, through a similar type device is fine. As soon as that gets more complicated, then the town would be working with them to get the necessary building approval for those structures, again, because of that safety issue, not only for the patrons of that patio, but also, you know, surrounding users as well. in wind events or other events as well. So the idea is to give basic shade available, but anything more complex for a structure would have to go to the building department. But again, under an expedited process to keep that process moving for them. I'm not sure, Barry, if you want to add anything to that.
Mr. Vickers, did you have anything to add?
Tim nailed it.
Okay.
If it requires a building permit, it requires a building permit. We'll expedite that. We'll work with the applicants. We'll make it happen fast.
Can I just ask for, so how big a tent would require a building permit? You're muted.
Sorry, so there's requirements. Anytime we'd have a restaurant, it wouldn't matter. Shade structures get tricky because they have to be of a fabric that's not going to cause issues for people if it ignites. So I think we put that in the piece. I think it was 10 square meters.
Okay.
It was 100 square feet, 108 square feet. So that would be the size.
You must be right, because Ms. Foster had her video on and now she's taken it off. So I think she was about to answer that question.
For that clarification.
Ms. Foster?
I apologize. Just some clarification. So the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit came out with their guidance for food operators in respect to the opening of stage 2. And it says patios must be open to the air. No tents, structures, canopies with sides, enclosures are permitted.
With sides, but those, I'm thinking of those
Right.
things you see at the flea market, which is like just the cover with the 4 legs. Like, the ones I mean, they're about 10 by 10. That's what I was thinking, but.
Yeah, and they're about 10 square feet. 100 square feet.
Yeah, I think the guidance from the health unit is saying tents with sides in them, I think, but this will all come out in the reg, I guess. Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just on that note, I don't think it's any different than it's ever been. That's always needed a building permit to do something like that. I mean, I speak from experience. We've always needed a building permit to make even a temporary structure. So I don't think that's anything special. We're not sneaking this in. It's always been there. If you go through our building bylaws and whatever, it's always been there. So it's not something that we just invented that restaurant owners or anybody else is going to need. It's always been there.
Okay, thank you. I think we've had good discussion. I think we're getting a little bit into the weeds. I think the key messages here are that the province announced that we were in stage 2, that it allows, but does not require a business to have outside seating. And we're trying to make it easier for our residents to, for our businesses. And I know that we are being very flexible and working very hard. And I've seen some of the emails that the ECDev team has sent out to some of the restaurants, explaining it all and, really taking a lot of time with them to help them understand. So I think that we're giving them as much assistance as we can. In the end, it's their business. They have to decide what's best for their business, and they have to feel confident that their staff and their patrons are going to be safe. And we're there as support, not with a hammer, but just with a helping hand whenever we can give it to them. Councillor Setti.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I can just move on to the parking, the second part of this report with the gradual reopening of beaches and the measures to that staff are recommending that certain parking lots are restricted and limited to residents, Innisfil residents only, and the list of them are in this report. And rather than naming them all, and just wanted clarification for those watching and also for myself, signage. So this, I'm sure that bylaw will be, have their staff, bylaw staff will be out ticketing for violations. But with all of these lots listed with the beach access, is there signage in place now, or will there be this weekend at all those lots saying residents only? Thank you.
I'm going to let Mr. Inwood answer that. But before I do, I'm going to say that there is no way we're going to be able to have our beaches open for tomorrow. We just cannot physically make it happen. We, again, have to make sure that we open in a very measured and cautious way, and that we follow the guidelines of the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit. And they're saying that we've got to put measures in place for physical distancing. And if we don't, I don't know if you heard him on the news the other night, if we don't, he said he can place an order to close the beaches. So the last thing we want to do is go backwards. We want to open and stay open. But having said that, and also to let you know, ever since we found out about this the same time everybody else found out about it, which was about 1:30 in the afternoon on Monday. Tuesday morning, we had our first EOC meeting. And by that time, staff had already started drafting out, you know, what if we did this? What if we did this? What if we did this? But to have all of that in place by this weekend, I don't think is at all feasible. But I'll leave it with Mr. Inwood. Now I probably stole his thunder, but go ahead, Mr. Inwood.
Thank you, Your Worship. All you needed to say is that yes, there would be parking signage in place when we do open up, and you would have had it all covered. So through you to Councillor Sadi, yes, we will have signage in place. As the mayor alluded to, there's a million moving pieces, all moving at a very rapid pace right now. Signage is obviously a priority, as is the communication plan on how we reach out to make sure that folks understand that the changes that are being made. But we will endeavor to have signage in place as soon as possible. And to Mayor Dolan's point, this weekend is not likely, but we will continue to staff the boat launches as we have. So, and of course, the hotspots like Innisfil Beach Park, which we do see a significant number of visitors coming through. We will be greeting them at the gate and, of course, allowing our residents in and asking non-residents to carry on. So much of the same I would anticipate for this weekend, but significant changes coming for the following.
Thank you. Councillor Fowler.
A quick question. Today I was down at Leonard's Beach and I saw the fencing that was being put in place. Is this the same sort of method of I guess the same methods that are being used on the road ends as well, or is it just specifically the beaches that we're looking at for this?
Mr. Inwood.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Fowler. There's a variety of different what I will call techniques and setups that are being placed site-specific. We are targeting, of course, our busiest, most popular locations, with Innisfil Beach Park being obviously #1, but 9th Line, Leonard's Beach, 10th Line. Some of the other larger facilities will be deploying our resources into those areas to get them set up first. But as everybody's well aware, there's 40 plus road ends, 17 or 18 of them with sandy beaches that are really appealing to the public for use. So we do work through in a priority sequence, but we are targeting those larger facilities first. And each facility will get its own unique setup because each one is unique in its own nature.
Thank you. Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Worship. This might be off subject a little bit, but it kind of ties in. And this is a question for Mr. Vickers. Now that, you know, construction is pretty well back on track and everybody is working, I know that he has some of his building inspectors in as bylaw officers. Is he short on staff now that we have to start, bringing back more building inspectors, more, bylaw officers? I mean, both need to be done, and we cut back and we made things work. But do we have to start slowly bringing things back to where the way they were to make all of these things that we're talking about work?
Mr. Vickers?
Through your worship to Councillor Van Berkel, yeah, we are stretched because all the cylinders are starting to fire. We're in the process. We actually made a job offer to a person to come and help us who used to help us on contract. So we've recognized that we're stretched, and we're hoping someone's going to start actually next week to assist us. So we are adding to the team, and we're really monitoring, the amount of overtime and where people are and whether they're, trying to make sure nobody's getting burnt out and that. So your concern is entirely legitimate, and we're watching it, and we are trying to make sure that we can cover all the bases. And so far we've been able to, but with the social distancing and the working remotely, things don't happen as quickly as they used to. And so we're continually finding ways to be more efficient, but it is a challenge, because you can only have one inspector in a car, and there's a number of things like that. Anyway, we're working on it, and it is an issue, and we are addressing it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And province-wide, as far as inspectors are concerned, I was learning today that there's a lack of inspectors throughout the province right now. I wanted to ask about bylaw, because we know we're going to be needing a lot of bylaw over the next little while. We're going to have a lot of people who are going to park where they're not supposed to park. We're going to have a lot of people on the beach when they're not supposed to be on the beach. And are we going to be prepared for the extent of the bill? I'm actually hoping and praying for a cold, wet summer, but this weekend is supposed to be fairly cool, which is, thank goodness. But if we do get a nice hot summer Saturday, are we going to be able to handle the bylaw enforcement?
So I'm hoping so. We have discussions. We actually didn't hire our students at the beginning of the summer because COVID had hit us, and that was sort of our first idea to be conscientious fiscally. But it soon occurred to us that we had responsibilities that did require full staff complement. So we've reached that. Our students are trained. Everybody's out in full force. We do have 2 building inspectors who are swinging into the bylaw side and doing a certain number of shifts. We have the whole park ambassador program, which helps focus bylaw people, it's a contributory process in letting bylaw do bylaw, and the park ambassadors do a certain amount of the educational piece that is largely what bylaw does. We're also we've also started the works of talking about how other municipal staff can get trained and deputized to write parking tickets. So that we're doing the cross-functional thing at an additional level to what we have been doing. So that process has been initiated, and we're looking to have more ticket writers on the ground than we've really ever had before.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. Councillor Waters?
Sorry about that. I couldn't find my mouse. Speaking of parking, I was noticing on the 25th on the weekend is that people have gotten the message that they shouldn't be parking on the east side of the 25th. I've noticed that they started parking on the west side, and I don't think I saw any signs there telling people they couldn't park. So correct me if I'm wrong. Are there signs there with no parking? And if not, I assume we'll just be ticketing those people.
Mr. Inwood?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Waters. We recently added some additional signage on the 25th on the east side. It was an identified area that was a problem. We are also aware of the west side issue. Unfortunately, we are out of signs and we're waiting on an order to come in. So we should have some more within the next week is my understanding. And additional signage will be placed as soon as that shipment comes in.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Councillor Asadi.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to make a comment. So many times, and I'm sure Councillor Waters hears this, and from many residents that they're always requesting that we have our lots for residents only. And Mr. Vickers from the building department and bylaw is, sharing the difficulty and the pressures on staffing. I think it just gives a real glimpse into the amount of staffing and the requirements and the difficulty to put this all in place to restrict even just during COVID to residents only. It's expensive. We have to staff it. It has to be, violations have to be given. So it's a real good glimpse into the consequences of that.
Thank you. Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Your Worship. Is there any way that we could do an advertisement for the parks to say that the residents are only allowed to go into the parks and not visitors? Because you can have a dozen signs and people aren't reading the signs. They're just going down, and then when they get down there and they're told they can't get in, they get angry, and it's the people that are telling them that they can't get in that are the brunt of their aggravation. If there's any way at all, like even if it's Barrie News, a radio channel, that we can get the point across on a Friday saying Innisfil Beach Park or any parks in Innisfil are for residents only until COVID-19 is finished. That's the only thing I can think of. But something's got to be done because they're not reading this.
Thank you, Councillor. And they're not listening to the advertising either. We've done joint advertising with the other municipalities that surround Lake Simcoe. At 5 o'clock this evening, I was on CBC, some CBC show, something about World CBC or Talk of the World or something. I've been on the morning show, both with the Metro Morning and the Ontario Morning twice, Metro Morning once. We've got signs out at the 400 highway telling people that our parks are not open. I've done 2 interviews with CTV News in Barrie as well. So it's just, we keep pushing the message out. Some people are getting it. I can tell by the hate mail I'm getting that some people are definitely getting that message. So now instead of just getting hate mail from the GTA, I'm going to get hate mail nationally because of the CBC National News. But such is life. I have broad shoulders and that's fine. But yeah, we are doing that, and there'll be another communication go out after this evening's meeting. Mr. Rayner.
Thank you, Worship, members of council. To Councillor Payne's point, I just wanted to take this opportunity to sort of do the PSA, the public service announcement that really asks people to sort of follow our justice system and presume people are innocent until proven guilty. We've had a tremendous amount of complaints and sort of people taking it upon themselves to try to enforce the rules as they understand them. And I think it's the very best intentions and people are trying to be helpful. But as you can see from just glancing through the staff report tonight, about one small component, frankly, of what is a largely complicated stage 2 that's coming down from the province, combined with SMDHUs, the health units guidelines, and then our own bylaws, it's really complicated. And I think the public is confused, and rightly so. So we're doing our best to provide some of the best messaging. But I think if I can cut through it a little bit, the best messaging is please be patient and assume that your neighbor is doing something that they think is right under this regime and in this world that we're living in right now. And give people some time and some space to get used to this new normal that continues to shift under our ground. The idea that someone is going to call the police because they think that a Barrie resident is walking through our park just isn't a really good use of resources for anybody, including the person who's getting, very distraught about the fact that that's the case. Really need to encourage people to take a step back, take a breath, assume that people are really trying to do the best thing that they think they can, and give that space. And while I'm on the topic, Your Worship, if I could, I just want to thank Council for working with us tonight in this special council arrangement on a Thursday night. There's a real complexity with even how we roll out changes. So EOC, our Emergency Operations Center, continues to meet, as Your Worship mentioned, twice a week, and that group is doing the bulk of the heavy lifting in terms of making decisions and deploying actions hourly. But there are certain things that Council needs to pass bylaws for, and we really appreciate the opportunity that you've given us to get together like this. But we also appreciate that in some sense you're seeing only a fraction or a very small part of the overall discussion and the overall actions that are being taken related to parking or related to patios. And so we're happy to engage with you outside of the council meeting, obviously, if you have any other specific questions about what's going on. It is a very complicated time, but we appreciate everybody's efforts and want to just kind of assume the best as much as possible. Thank you, Worship.
Yeah, and I understand. I get the calls too from people saying we're not doing enough, that we should be somehow, checking ID when somebody's walking across the grass. We can't do that. We can't form a human chain around all of our parks and beaches. The most efficient way to do that is to limit places people can park. But if somebody wants to park 2 kilometers down the road and hike it up to the park, we cannot stop and ask them to produce some kind of ID at that point. We're doing, actually Barrie, the city of Barrie, as of Saturday is going to be replicating what we're doing. They're making their waterfront parking for city residents only, but that doesn't stop any resident from any municipality from parking in one of the downtown lots and walking to the shoreline in Barrie. So we're trying to find a way, but Mr. Rayner has a good point. We have to be kind. I had somebody phone me panicking because there was someone from out of town on their road end. And when I asked how they knew they were from out of town, they said, well, I asked them, I said, are you from around here? And they said, no, they were from Stroud. So they said no, because they weren't from around there. So people have to not be too militant and just be kind. And this is a difficult situation. We are doing absolutely everything we can do within our resources, and staff are working like around the clock to pivot and make stuff happen when the province makes an announcement, and we've got 3.5 days of whirlwind trying to figure out ways to make it work for our community and keep our community safe. And we are all doing that. Councillor Van Berkel.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just on that note, and I agree with you 100%. One of my worry is, and we're the leadership team, and everyone, our CAO, all of us are busier than we ever were before. But I worry about some of our departments that are really taking the overload. You know, like our Mr. Vickers with us, he's got 2 departments there. And I worry about putting so much pressure on these guys, the boots on the ground, as we call them, you know, that are doing these things, that they're going to burn out because, you know, they take abuse every day, especially our bylaw officers. I mean, you know, they go someplace and they want to give a ticket and they're being called, well, they're being called names. And I worry about that. I really do, because they don't deserve it. They work hard and they're following our directions. And I think we should really, really, really appreciate what they're doing and help them if we can, because I hear it every day. I hear it every day when I talk to them, when I see them. I see people, you know, abusing them on parking lots and whatever. They go there and do their job because we send them out there and do that job, and they're being abused. And I think we really, really got to watch that they're not going to be stressed out and you know, not overstretch these departments. If we need more people, and I don't care what's on Facebook and what on Twitter or whatever else, you know, look after our people, because that's going to be the main thing to get over this. They're doing their very best, and most of them are doing more than their very best. So please, as our CEO, Jason, look after them.
Mr. Rayner?
No, well said, Councillor Van Berkel, for sure. As you know, 85% of our costs are people, and they are the lifeblood of the community, delivering those services and programs. So absolutely, and I think your message is really appreciated, and also that I don't know any staff member who's taken a significant vacation in the last 4 months. Given the pandemic and the work that's been going on. And so we are encouraging people and working really hard to make sure that people do take some downtime. But that's also why you're seeing, you know, the librarian on the boat launch and the firefighter helping with the mail, because we are redeploying in real time our resources to try to manage those peaks. And that, I think, as you say it very well, Councillor Van Berkel, it's not a sprint, you know, it's a marathon. This isn't going to go away tomorrow. So we need to be able to pace ourselves, but make sure that we're actually, you know, responding to the needs of the community. And so nice to have projects internally have been put on hold, and we are focusing all of our efforts on the COVID response.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Ryan. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fowler?
I fully back Councillor Van Berkel's statement. I've been having discussions with town staff today. That's why later today, later during the meeting, I'm having an amendment put in. I'm trying to have one put in at least to see what alternative measures we can do to protect our staff. I've been speaking with residents and hearing firsthand what they witness with our bylaw officers. I think it's horrendous. I think that when we have people, not to draw lines in the sand, but people that come from out of town that don't respect the boundaries that are here, don't respect the people that are here, don't respect the work that goes into our beaches that we put in, that, you know, something has to change. I'm sorry, there has to be an alternative measure. Education is good. I think it's doing a fabulous job for the people that are receptive, but there are those who do not wish to listen no matter what. So we have to come back with something a little harsher for those small sect of people that wishes to paint everybody with the same brush. Those that find the alternative routes into Innisfil Beach Park, those that, you know, tear up the tickets and throw them at our bylaw officers, those that are verbally abusive and whatnot. There comes a point where we can talk, but at one point, you know, when the people stop listening, we have to find a way to make them understand. So I mean, I feel for the bylaw officers and the people who go out on our front lines. They are our boots on the ground. They're our point of contact to people who don't live in town, and they're taking the heat in a manner that I think is highly unfair. I think we need to, you know, educate initially, but if someone wishes not to listen, hit them in the pocketbook, hit them where it hurts, find a way for them to register. Otherwise, they'll just keep on assuming that we're not going to change and they can do whatever they want in our town.
So did you have an amendment you wanted to put forward, Councillor? Now would be the time.
Yes, I have one here. I wrote it up earlier today with staff's assistance. That I'd like to add an amendment that the town staff be directed to investigate and report back on issues of enforcement regarding parking in and around the town's beaches and make recommendations for solutions that can be implemented swiftly. The reason I put it that way is when I talked to Mr. Vickers earlier today about parking fees and, you know, tickets and whatnot, and the route we had to take, going through the provincial level, speaking to the Attorney General, getting applications put in. It's a long process that we were not going to get results in time. So if staff can come back with something that we can implement on a municipal level that will get the message across that if you come to Innisfil, you respect Innisfil. If you do not, we, you know, have methods in place to make you understand that that is not acceptable behavior.
Do you have a seconder for your amendment?
Councillor Van Berkel.
Councillor Van Berkel. Questions or comments on the amendment? Councillor Sadi.
Thank you, Your Worship. I find this amendment, I understand Councillor Fowler's concern, and it's quite considerate. It has been quite discussion about staff and how they've been treated. We have to remember too, staff are sometimes abused by our own residents. So not to put all the blame on out-of-towners, I think we need to be very careful that we're not giving a message that we, you know, don't not welcome people from out of town. But I just find this amendment very broad. It's not specific enough. It's just, aren't staff doing this already is what I'm going to ask. I look at this amendment and I think they're already doing this.
Mr. Rayner?
It's a great point through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Sadi. And of course, Councillor Sadi is familiar as chair of the Innisfil Beach Advisory Committee, just how complicated and how unintended consequences can occur when you start messing with people's parking. Residents, you know, not that they're having big parties, but allowing 10 members to get together of a family now, socially distanced may result in more cars. So we are doing this, but I think certainly happy to take direction from council. And I think Councillor Fowler is intending for us to dig deeply into our toolbox and perhaps provide back to you, council, some options that could increase the ability to address what is likely to be an escalating situation over the next several weeks as we get nicer and nicer weather. So it could be as simple as, I don't want to purchase a tow truck, but perhaps there's a contract where we actually begin to tow people more readily than we would otherwise to send a deterrent message. So there's those kinds of things. And as you said, we would be considering them anyways, but certainly happy to provide a report to council if that's your decision.
Other questions or comments on the amendment? Councillor Fowler.
Yes, like I don't want to make it seem as if I'm coming into Innisfil Beach Park with a wooden piece of doweling and just, you know, beating people. It's not my intention. But my intention is just to give our bylaw officers the tools to address the troublemakers, that be they residents or non, that seek to do as they wish and flaunt the rules. You can talk, again, as much as you like, but if someone refuses to listen, you have to find a way to communicate the message. And so far, what normally, I will be honest, if it were a normal year without the COVID-19, we could have the patience and the understanding and the time to reach everybody. But what we have now is a situation where come midnight, we're in stage 2, and people from stage 1 are going to come up, and as I understand it, there's going to be a majority of people who follow the rules, but those that do not put the rest of us at risk. And that to me is something that needs to be addressed. Normally, if you can do such a thing, that's fine if you're not putting other people's health at risk. But if you're going to come to another town where the rules are relaxed and not take care of yourself, you're putting Innisfil residents at risk. And that's, I need something that I feel as a councillor gives our people, our staff, the tools to go out and protect our residents. And sometimes, you know, does it make sense?
Yeah,
I'm trying
it
to
does.
express.
It does. I'm just going to ask Mr. Vickers to answer a question though. Mr. Vickers, this isn't new. And what happens now? What training do our bylaw officers have that if they tell a resident or a non-resident to do something and they don't do it, what tools do they have in the toolbox at this time?
So we always go with the mindset of looking to educate and acquire compliance. And in the majority of cases, citizens respect that, and we do get compliance most of the time. And then it depends, if we're just talking of parking, then it's just a parking ticket. Staff's trained to walk away at certain levels of, you know, when they have discomfort. I mean, they're professionals. This is what they signed up for, and what you and I might find as unacceptable behavior, they do face every day, and to us it's abuse. But they are actually professionals in de-escalating and knowing how to handle themselves and how to handle those kinds of situations. The sentiments expressed tonight will be greatly appreciated by staff. I can tell you that. We write parking tickets and then we fine them. So that's if that's the parking issues we're speaking of. And we go to court on a number of other matters related to bylaw offenses.
And do we work with the police? Like if there was something that the escalated situation?
Absolutely. So if there's a situation that warrants it, a bylaw person will walk away. They'll call for backup to be an instant sort of assessment of what the situation warrants. And South Simcoe are there very quickly. If bylaw calls for assistance, they're pretty quick to respond to those kinds of situations.
Thank you. And if they rip up a ticket, doesn't mean they don't have to pay it. The ticket will still be valid. Correct. And they'll probably have to pay a whole bunch of penalty and interest if they rip up a ticket and try not to pay it. Okay. Yeah, Councillor Bell, I just wanted you to know that, well, I totally appreciate where you're going with this. I didn't want to give the public or you the thought that none of that was already in place. Like we do have, they do have an escalation and have those powers. But I totally understand the motion at this point because things are going to get trickier as the summer goes on, unless my wish of having a cold, wet summer comes to fruition, that we will have these issues going forward. I'm wondering about the staff time of another report, or could we just delegate authority to the EOC to let them deal with it how they see fit? That would be my only other comment. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think considering the environment that we're in right now, it's all about de-escalating. And I also agree with you that, the town staff have enough reports to do already. So I'm not too sure what else they can possibly do. I think they're doing their jobs, they're doing it well under, stressful circumstances. And I think, that de-escalation, and they understand all of that. And then when things, when they do need it, they have the police as backup. So I appreciate Councillor Fowler's wishes here, but I'm not too sure another report for staff to do when they're already busy is going to make anything different. But I do appreciate the sentiment that he's trying to pass on.
Any other comments or questions on the amendment? Councillor Orsatti.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I too want to echo Councillor Waters. I think it's it's very considerate at Councillor Fowler to be thinking of our staff and the pressures that they're under. I like yourself, Your Worship, am concerned with requesting staff to come back with a report when I think they have a lot on their plates. And for me, I'm assuming that if staff have issues, they're addressing it to their superior. If it was bylaw, they would be doing that to Mr. Vickers, and solutions would be discussed in the EOC meeting and how that could be handled and addressed moving forward. So I think that Councillor Fowler's recommendation is probably already being done, with the exception of a report back to council, and we do get a copy of that EOC meeting report.
Thank you. I believe we might have lost Councillor Payne. Oh, you're still there. Councillor Payne, I thought you had to go. You have a Heritage Committee meeting, do you not? Did you want to, you're muted right now.
They're holding it until this is finished. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let's call for a vote then, unless there's on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment? Those two, so that doesn't count. Those opposed? Okay, that's lost. Did anybody want to put forward an amendment to delegate authority to the EOC for that?
I would recommend that if Councillor Fowler wanted to change his amendment for that.
Well, this one's lost, but if there was another amendment to that enforcement regarding parking in and around the town's beaches be delegated, the authority be delegated to the Emergency Operations Center. Is there a mover or a seconder for that motion? Councillor Payne, is there a seconder? There's no seconder, it's not on the floor. Councillor Orsatti, are you seconding it? Okay, so questions or comments on this amendment? All in favor of the amendment? I can't see hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's carried. So now the motion as amended. Moved by Councillor Van Berkel, seconded by Councillor Waters. All those in favor? That's carried. The confirming bylaw is moved by Councillor Ices, seconded by Councillor Fowler. All those in favor? That's carried. Just before we adjourn, I want to thank staff again for all of the heavy lifting this week. The province says jump and we say how high. And we will, for residents who are watching, be working around the clock to get our beaches ready, but to do a safe opening and follow all the guidelines of the Medical Officer of Health. And with that, I'd ask for a mover and seconder for adjournment. Councillor Waters, Councillor Van Berkel, all those in favor? That is carried. Thank you everyone very much for your attention tonight, and be well, stay safe, and we'll talk on the 24th.
Good night.
Thank you everyone very